rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast on this Friday. I hope you're looking forward to your weekend. Guys, I want to ask you this question. Does China's surveillance instruments already exist inside of the United States? Or their surveillance system already exists inside of the United States? I contend that it does. I want to go over a few headlines with you this morning. And just go through a couple of these columns and just try to build the case for you that we are in trouble in the United States in a way that's scary. If I'm being totally frank and honest with you, what's happening in the United States is completely scary. Sometimes it seems overwhelming and crushing. However, I don't want you to panic. There is still room to call your congressmen, call your senators. We've got to fight like hell to make sure that we roll back some of the stuff that the Democrat Party has used and implemented. It's going to take men of conviction and women. It's going to take steals of backbone on the Republican side. And more importantly, it's going to take you and I using our phones like never before, protesting like never before, and putting our Constitution to the test. I just want to give you a couple of headlines before I get started. China's paper revolution could be the beginning of the end for Xi Jinping. How a secret Google geofence warrant helped catch the Capitol the Capitol riot mob. Now, this is a left-wing piece from Wired, but it's important to know that it exists, and that way the left cannot deny its existence. We're going to talk about this geofencing. I heard about this story. It broke, I believe it was on Revolver News at the beginning of the week. I had not had the time to get to this story, so I want to share it from a left-wing perspective. And then you have this from the Daily Signal hat tip. Documents reveal Senate Democrat pressured IRS DOJ to target conservative groups. All right, so let's start here. China's paper revolution. Guys, this is the biggest story in quite some time. And not just this week, in quite some time. This is a huge story. What's happening, the backlash that the CCP is experiencing in China. It's something that they've not seen for over 30 years with Tiananmen Square. And some argue that this is even bigger because as Tiananmen Square was organized by some protesters that were known, I guess, this is totally different, where the protests have been spontaneously breaking out in different regions of China. And so this is huge. So what sparked it? Obviously, the fire that happened in Xinjiang or I don't know how to pronounce it, Xinjiang or what have you, where Uyghurs were killed, locked up in their apartment building, and I'll get to that shortly. But it was something else that also was a catalyst to the protest, and that is this: a lot of Chinese protesters, for the first time, they were able to get a glimpse of what was happening outside of their world while they were sitting and watching the World Cup. That's right. Chinese protesters were watching the World Cup, and they started to figure out, or they started to ask, why the rest of the world had moved on from COVID while they were still cooped up in their tiny apartments, living like animals, bored and hungry. Why were they enduring this and the rest of the world wasn't? They thought that they were doing the same thing. This was their sacrifice in order to end this COVID pandemic. But they were fooled. And they realized it. And I thought the World Cup was absolutely good for nothing. But apparently it was good for waking up Chinese dissidents. It's unbelievable. They risked their personal safety, even their lives, residents in multiple cities. I mean, they took to the streets to end these zero COVID policies. People were getting sick and tired of these zero COVID policies. And I'm telling you, I'm going to tie this all together because China is a major surveillance state. And now I'd argue that so is the United States of America. But consider what these people have to endure. Could you imagine? Imagine we have the luxury of calling 911 in the United States, and All of a sudden, we get these men or women that will show up to our house, police or firemen that'll help us out, that'll save the day for us, those of us that might be in need. Perhaps we're victims of a violent crime. Perhaps it's a fire. Perhaps it's something else. But we have the luxury of calling these people, and they show up relatively quickly. Well, imagine living in a place where you're being sequestered or you're being isolated from the public. A fire breaks out and there's no help coming, and you know it. You're getting ready to cook to death, like you're in an oven, like you're in a deep fry. I don't know. You're getting like you're on you're being broiled or flame broiled, like the Whopper. You're getting ready to be cooked to death. Imagine the screams. Imagine the horror. Imagine the smell. That would never leave you. These people in China are holding up blank sheets of paper that I suspect, if things don't change in the United States, perhaps we'll be doing the same thing. They're holding up these blank sheets of paper in order to protest or to kind of illustrate, I should say, that they can't say anything about anything. There is no free speech inside of China with the CCP, with Xi Jinping in charge. Anti-government movements known as Color Revolution and Xi's is their biggest fear. Now, what are these color revolutions? Color revolutions are a term that describe anti-government sentiment. See, in China, they're allowed to, right? They're allowed to protest, small and local, have small and local protests. They can protest local governments, local authorities. They can do that. However, what they cannot protest inside of China, they can't protest Xi, and they cannot protest the CCP. Until now, it hasn't happened. Xi has been in office literally for 10 years. This has not happened till now. He's been in power since 2012. He's built this high-tech surveillance state to monitor 1.4 billion Chinese people and their thoughts. Imagine the audacity. Imagine the evil. Imagine the ambition you have to have. 1.4 billion people. You want to be able to micromanage every single one of them. You can't do it unless you crack down, unless you scare people, unless you beat people, unless you imprison people, unless you murder people right in front of their neighbors' faces so that they will comply. This is what's happening in China's revolution. You guys know the backstory. This deadly fire in a high-rise apartment that killed at least 10 in Xinjiang, the same area where you have the Uyghur Muslims that have been subjected to genocide. Quite frankly, they're literally being killed. Video spread of victims that were desperately crying out. I should have had some of that audio for you, but it's hard to take. I'll be honest with you. The rescuers couldn't even get inside of the facility, not if they wanted to. These people are literally locked in. It took fire trucks more than 2 hours, according to this column from the Federalist, 2 hours to reach the burning building due to the barriers that were set up by the local authorities in the area. Unbelievable. These people were totally confined to their apartments. And this has been the case since the early days of COVID in 2020. So these people are going on 3 years where this has been routine for them, being sealed up. Their front entrances of entire apartment building complexes being sealed up. As Americans, this is stuff that we can't fathom. I've been thinking about this. We have a great opportunity in the United States to reintroduce people to the Constitution and freedom, because honestly, a lot of these colleges and universities, these woke professors, media, whatever, all they've been brainwashing our children with and young men and women with are thoughts of slavery and thoughts of submission. It's almost as if I'm somewhat rejuvenated because I feel like the Constitution is new and it's fresh and it's something that we can introduce. Consider this. See, this is what the Chinese people are having to consider. So Xinjiang fire is only one of several tragedies that Xi and the CCP is responsible for over the last year. Let's recap some of the other things that have happened. In January, And you know this has happened widespread. But these are some of the stories that broke through the press that somehow got released or got out, if you will. In January, a woman who was 8 months pregnant in Xi'an lost her baby after local hospitals refused to treat her because she had COVID. Her COVID test had expired by a few. Her COVID test had expired. She didn't even necessarily have COVID, but her COVID test had expired by a few hours. So they just let this lady's baby die. Unbelievable. During the Shanghai lockdowns between March and April, children as young as newborns were taken away from their parents and committed to poorly run and filthy government daycare facilities. I've seen pictures online of people inside of these daycares, and these were adults. An adult woman is what I saw, literally trying to get out of the way of what looked to be dirty water in the middle of the floor, trying to make sure that she isn't contaminated by it. Just disgusting. Residents also experienced severe food shortages. Can you imagine that? Remember what was happening in Shanghai? Remember that protest that we saw in Shanghai? All these people were upset. Some people jumped to their deaths as a result of it. Some of their animals were being taken away as a result of the zero COVID policy. Do you remember that? I mean, you're talking about China's very prosperous, if not the most prosperous city in China, Shanghai. A bunch of professionals there, and they're being locked down like cage animals, starving to death. Some people showing us pictures of their refrigerators. That's real oppression. That's not what we experience here. I'm telling you, this is the biggest story in a long time, in my opinion. As a direct result of China's zero. Here's this too. Last month, a woman in Beijing, the capital of China, was welded into her apartment buildings for days. She jumped to her death from her apartment building. The audio of her daughter from days before can be heard, quote, banging on the gate and begging community workers to unseal her mother's door and help her. Can you imagine knowing your mother is probably going to die, not because she's sick or ill, not because of the threat of a criminal, but because the government out there is willing to sit by and watch her die to adhere to these zero COVID policies. As a direct result of China's zero COVID policies, the Chinese people have experienced many pent-up fears, frustrations, and furies, and they're getting fed up. But they're afraid. They're afraid that they'll end up missing or become the victims of these little tyrants, or their families will. And they want to desperately avoid becoming those next victims. They're frustrated. They're suffering. However, the sacrifices that they've made, it's not defeated COVID. As a matter of fact, the Chinese people are also furious because Xi made it clear during his most recent speech at the 20th Party Congress that his zero COVID approach is here to stay. Yet China has experienced a record, listen to this, number of COVID infections. This stuff doesn't work. It seems to only elongate the problem because they never really deal with the issue. So this was the last straw. That fire in Xinjiang was the last straw before the Xi dissidents decided to take a stand, regardless of the threat of prison time, or even worse in their cases. These people can be sentenced up to 3 years just for a simple protest. But it can get even worse. And in fact, I'm sure that it does. But protesters in China are upset by even more than, we don't get this news. We think, because LeBron James makes lots of money from China and Nike and all of these companies, everything there is hunky-dory. It's not. These people just want to make money from the 1.4 billion people that happen to reside in China, although many of them are poor as all get out. So I don't know how that's possible. But anyway, you have 1.4 billion people in China compared to 330 million. And when you look at the people like LeBron or Nike or whomever, and I don't just want to solely pick on LeBron, there's plenty of corporations that are profiting off of the CCP in China, slave labor and everything else. But China is tanking financially. No one talks about this. It says here people are dissatisfied with Xi's economic policies, Xi's ideological war on China's private businesses and Chinese entrepreneurs. His tit for tat trade war with then President Donald Trump and the 3-year lockdowns have caused China's economic growth to significantly slow down. And we don't talk about this. We think everything is hunky dory in China, and it's not. Man, he depressed some sectors such as so some sectors like property. The property market have been severely depressed, according to the article, and unemployment rates are up, especially among young people, and they're just frustrated with this nonsense. And I don't blame them. And it's all coming to a head when they see someone dying right in front of their eyes. When they hear the cries of someone dying right in front of their eyes, they're starting to wake up. You know, it's a weird thing. These people gave up liberty for safety. One of our founders said, if you give up liberty, and I'm paraphrasing, if for the sake of safety, you'll get neither. And that's exactly what they're experiencing. Many of these Chinese people, they made a deal with Xi Jinping and the CCP to forget that the Chinese people, they would accept fewer rights in exchange for safety and prosperity. This was their negotiation with the Chinese Communist Party. But what they don't understand, or they're starting to now, is that the communists, their appetite is insatiable. It will never, ever be satisfied. And this is what these people are starting to realize. There's huge sex trafficking problems as well. Besides economic issues, the Chinese people are concerned about their safety and the government's corruption. Here's one of the things that is going on. In February this year, right around the Beijing Winter Olympic Games, news of a woman in I don't know how to pronounce this, Wuzhou, China, being found locked up in a doorless animal hut in freezing temperatures sparked an uproar. The government tried to lie, or local police tried to lie and said this was a mental health issue. Turns out she was being sex trafficked. I mean, just disgusting. Her husband apparently had been sex trafficking her and abusing her, and nothing was even done about it until finally there was such an outcry, and this is a local issue. There was such an outcry that something was done about it. These people live under a huge surveillance state. These people live under huge oppression, and as bad as that is, we're ushering it in here. We're asking for this here. I don't even know what we're getting in return. We don't appear to be getting safety. We don't appear to be getting prosperity. I read a headline where the unsolved murder rate is up significantly in the United States. It's insane. It's crazy, but this is where we are. This is where we are. Let me just read part of this. This is from Wired. Now, this is a left-wing organization, but nonetheless, they spit out the truth, not knowing what they're doing. Thank God for Elon Musk, or perhaps they do because some people are concerned about it. The title is How a Secret Google Geofence Warrant Helped Catch the Capitol Riot Mob. Now, again, this is a left-wing organization, so they look at us like evil freaking Republicans, evil conservatives, or what have you. But nonetheless, let me just read some of this if you'll bear with me. Court documents suggest the FBI has been using controversial geofence search warrants at a scale not publicly seen before, collecting account information and location data on hundreds of devices inside the U.S. Capitol during, they call it a deadly invasion by a right-wing mob on January 6th, okay? Left-wing organization. We know it was a mostly peaceful protest. Nevertheless, this is coming from the left, so here's what they have to say about it. While Google receives over 10,000 geofence warrants for location data in the U.S. a year, those covering the Capitol breach appear to have been particularly productive, apparently enabling the FBI to build a large, searchable database in its hunt for the rioters. Actually what it was, and I want to make sure that I write this down, in its hunt for a narrative. That's what they were looking for. They were looking for narrative. That was the real hunt. So geofence warrants are intended, the article goes on to say, to locate anyone in a given area using digital services. Google has been the target for many geofence warrants because its location technology, which leverages GPS, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth signals to pinpoint a phone within a few yards, are powerful and widely used. And we were told that what Dinesh D'Souza was able to find out about what was happening during the 2020 election cycle was false. Yet these people inadvertently confirm that he's right. Geofence warrants are intended to locate anyone in a given area using digital services. I just read that. Investigators can and do also serve warrants on phone companies. However, cell phone towers can only locate phones to within about 3/4 of a mile, while court documents suggest that the FBI collected cell tower records for thousands of devices that were inside the Capitol during the riot. Google's data offers a much higher degree of accuracy. In other words, so when it comes to these cell phone towers, again, they can locate phones up to 3/4 of a mile, according to this article, according to their data. But Google has a much broader range, perhaps miles. I'm not exactly sure, but they have a much larger range. The use of geofence search warrant was first reported by the Washington Post and others that have previously noted specific instances. Forgive me, I'm reading here, but bear with me. This is a left-wing article that I came across right before the podcast, and I just wanted to mention it because this is extremely important. And I wanted to mention it from a left-wing perspective because the scary part is they think this is useful. They think this is useful. They don't understand that this can be turned against them. So the use of geofence search warrant was, again, reported by the Washington Post, and others have previously notified specific instances of investigation that use Google geolocation data. But Wired has found 45 federal crime cases that cite Google geolocation data to place suspects inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. And you guys know the number has continued. And basically, this is done with anonymity. It's a large fishing expedition is what it is. So Google, along with their geofencing, working in conjunction with our DOJ and FBI, were on a fishing expedition on January 6th, regardless of whether or not these people committed a crime or not. They were going on a fishing expedition. They were actually on a narrative expedition. So they were using this geofencing as a catch-all to create this narrative. People that were in the Capitol, whether they were let in by police officers or not, were dragged into this. So don't tell me that a surveillance state does not exist. There's a professor, a law professor and Fourth Amendment expert at the University of Utah. And this guy isn't a conservative by all accounts, but I'm just skipping through the article. He says what might have happened is that the FBI got the anonymized data and just got straight back in touch with Google and said, we suspect 90% of these people, so give us their IDs. Or it may have been an atypical warrant where they said to Google, give us not only the numbers, but the account names, because we think we have probable cause on the bulk of them. This is before going to any type of grand jury. This is before anyone sees a defense attorney. This is a catch-all. As a matter of fact, there's a thing called user deleted locations for multiple suspects. The FBI eventually gathered a wide set of Google data, including recovery numbers and emails and dates on which the accounts were created. And last assess, some court filings even note that the FBI agents could see a field called user deleted locations. This is the first known time that the geofencing has been used, or the DOJ has used this geofencing for a catch-all, system or catch-all. What am I trying to say? A catch-all for catch-all purposes. To just anybody in the vicinity, we're going to get them. We're going to use this geo-tracking, and we're going to build a case against them. Now, some people were inside the Capitol, others were not. They did it anyway. According to Tim O'Brien, he's a tech industry executive currently working on AI policy at Microsoft. He says this: it does sound unusual, but it's worth noting that this whole circumstance is unusual. He goes on to say, if I were law enforcement, I would argue that the 3-step process is unnecessary in this case, because the moment you set foot inside the Capitol, you became a suspect or a witness. So no need for no need for the law to get involved. No need for a defense attorney. These people can go straight from geofencing to conviction if they want. Just bypass our Constitution. It's absolutely amazing. I mean, I can go on, but I'll be going into greater detail with this on the Dennis Prager show as I sit in for him today. But just be aware that exists, that the surveillance state exists inside of the United States. We saw it, honestly, even during the Tea Party movement. Locally, I was involved big time. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I was not involved big time, but I was active. I'll put it this way. I was active locally during the Tea Party era right here in Orlando, Florida, or in Central Florida, and helped work on a congressional campaign at the time. And not that I was some major factor in that. I wasn't, but just going to different rallies, going to different meetings, talking about it on air when I got an opportunity, writing about it. And as a result, I believe that I was audited. Now, this last headline, I just want to bring to your attention. Exclusive documents reveal Senate Democrat pressured IRS DOJ to target conservative groups. Huh? Yeah, that's right. That's right. So you have this guy, Senator Sheldon White, Democrat. All right. So Senator Sheldon White, Democrat, Rhode Island, called for revoking a tax exemption for a conservative group for not masking up and socially distancing during the pandemic, insisted on a slew of investigations of other conservative groups. All right, so because people refused to mask up, because people did not comply with big government, this guy wanted to throw conservative groups under the bus. And he pressed for the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS of all places, to expand their search. And we're hiring, Joe Biden is, 87,000 new IRS agents. A total of 176 pages of correspondence from and to White House was obtained from the IRS by the conservative watchdog group American Accountability Foundation through the Freedom of Information Act and shared with the Daily Signal. It's abundantly clear that White House is trying to take the 87,000 new IRS agents and put them to work investigating me and my friends because he doesn't like their politics. This is that's a quote from Tom Jones, the president and founder of the American Accountability Group. This, again, is Lois Lerner on steroids. You guys may remember Lois Lerner. We thought she was going to go to jail, and she should have. She was ahead of the IRS, and she was specifically targeting Tea Party groups or conservative groups at the time to make sure that Barack Obama wouldn't lose. I believe it was in 2012. She was doing all that she could to use the power of the IRS to crush conservative movements. And unbelievable. Now we have a surveillance state. You have a Democrat Party that wants a surveillance state because they want to be in charge. This is control at the scales, in my opinion. They want to emulate China. They want to emulate Xi Jinping, but we the people can still stand up while we have time. They targeted Turning Point USA in a letter, that's Charlie Kirk's organization. In a letter dated January 9, 2021, White House asked IRS Commissioner Charles Redding to revoke the tax-exempt status of TPUSA because the conservative organization held an event at then-President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club without masking and social distancing. See, so they use COVID. They use this as a pretext to get what they want, and that is complete. The left does complete and utter authoritarianship. That's what they want. These guys want to be dictators. Turning Point USA's mission is to train and develop young Americans to become conservative leaders. And I'm quoting here. This is, I'm not sure who this is from, but it says, tax-exempt status provides a substantial benefit to charitable organizations and reflects the federal government's endorsement of an organization's activities. Oh, this is White House himself, wrote to the IRS chief. Organizations that knowingly put in danger minors entrusted to their care should not enjoy the benefits of tax-exempt status. Accordingly, I urge the IRS to review whether it should revoke Turning Point USA's tax-exempt status. Unbelievable. I mean, it goes on. There's more. But for the sake of time, I won't go on, but there has to be a resistance to this. Remember, the left was really big in using the word resistance. Well, we've got to be resistance. We cannot allow the full takeover the full takeover of our federal government inside of the United States. That's what we're seeing in China right now. That's what they're enduring in China right now. I'm not sure if these people will be able to turn the tide in China. Again, the article from the Federalist states China's paper revolution could be the beginning of the end for Xi. I don't know that that's true, simply because if he uses tanks that were, rolling into the area that the CCP was trying to hide, if he's using tanks, if he's using the sheer power of military might to crush dissent, who's going to speak up? What are they going to do? Hopefully there is a continued uprising. I pray that Xi loses power. I just think it's highly unlikely. So we cannot let it get to that point here. Republicans, I have little to no confidence in them, but we're going to have to use our voices to make sure they do our bidding, to make sure the United States does not become a police state. Guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Also, please follow us on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. And don't forget MyPillow. Christmas is closing in fast. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Carl, spell it with the C, and you can get the latest and greatest deals that apply to you there. Discounts up to 66% off on towels, dog beds that are on sale, slippers, you name it. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, use that promo code Carl in the radio listener square. Just type it in there, and any deal that's available to you, do your Christmas shopping there. You can search the website. Great products there, a great founder and CEO, and Mike Lindell, Patriot, providing American jobs, American products. We all love that, I hope. Also, you can, if you prefer, you can give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. All right, guys, until next time, do not grow weary doing good, and God bless.